D.C. today, bracing for the return of Donald Trump to the presidency. Within the last hour, Trump making clear just what kind of presidency he had in mind all along by naming Congressman Matt Gaetz as his choice to be the country's attorney general. Trump making that news in a social media post by saying that Gaetz will, quote, end weaponized government, which is in and of itself a delusion of the far right. It is yet another sign, though, that Donald Trump is rewarding loyalty this time above everything else as he builds a new cabinet. Since Gaetz was all in on Donald Trump's attempt to overturn the 2020 election. In fact, he was so concerned about his criminal exposure that he asked Donald Trump for a pardon in the last days of Trump's first presidency. Gaetz was also under investigation for sex trafficking as recently as 2023. He will now lead the department that once investigated him, should he be confirmed. That breaking news is where we start today with former top prosecutor at the Department of Justice, Andrew Weissmann, and former Democratic Senator and MSNBC political analyst, Claire McCaskill. So, Andrew Weissmann, this to me, while shocking and galling, is the least surprising thing Trump has done since he won. I think since he won Tuesday night, yesterday he put Marco Rubio atop the State Department, and people at this table said, oh, this isn't going to be so bad. On Monday, he made the announcement that he would turn to recess appointments. It's obvious that this trio of Fox News anchors, Matt Gaetz, whose biggest war in Washington is with Kevin McCarthy, and Tulsi Gabbard, was what the recess appointment was all about.
Yeah, I sort of had two reactions to this announcement, and one is very similar to yours, which is we have in the president-elect somebody who is clearly not tethered to facts or law. With respect to facts, we know he has said repeatedly that there was a fraud in the election and he won it, and we know that is not true, and he lost all of the cases but one, and that one was on some technical issue. So he is adhering to a world where facts and law don't matter. And so we shouldn't be surprised that he has selected to nominate, yet to be confirmed, somebody for the Attorney General and somebody for the Department of National Intelligence that are not just unqualified, but have shown that they're untethered to the facts and maybe also the law. So that shouldn't be surprising. And the other is really this idea of that somehow Matt Gaetz is going to be the person who prevents and stops weaponization when he is the exhibit A to weaponization. I mean, we are in pure George Orwell 1984 land where, they say black is white and we're supposed to believe it.
Claire, the rub is that people like Matt Gaetz are, well, let me just show you. They're laughing stocks on the right. Let me show you what Claire's in here. Oh, we're working on this, but let me share some of the things that folks on the right have said about him with you, Claire. Eric Hirschman, who was White House counsel for Donald Trump, I think the country got to know him during the January 6th Select Committee hearings, confirmed on the record in his deposition. When asked, was Representative Gaetz requesting a pardon? Eric Hirschman, I believe so. The general tone was, we may get prosecuted because we were defensive of the president's positions on things. Question, how do you know that Congressman Gaetz asked for a pardon? John McEntee, he told me. Tell me about that. John McEntee, he told me he'd asked Meadows for a pardon. Cassidy Hutchinson, Gaetz was personally pushing for a pardon, and he was doing so since early December. Asked by Adam Kinzinger, the only reason I know to ask for a pardon is because you think you've committed a crime. Claire, this is the kind of person you also install if your plan is what you talked about on the campaign trail and what you insisted, even in friendly interviews, wasn't your plan, and that's retribution.
Yeah, there's a couple of things about this. First, I have to think that there are more than 4 votes that would not show up for Matt Gaetz in the Republican caucus. I did a quick rundown of the Republican senators, and I came up with 11 names that I think would likely oppose a Matt Gaetz. Now, half or more of those could disappoint America and vote for someone who is so wholly unqualified for this job in so many ways. But is Donald Trump nominating him so that he can get Tulsi Gabbard through, or maybe this Fox News contributor? You know, we've gone from only hiring the best people to only hiring people that are completely unqualified for the jobs that they are being nominated for. You know, the Fox News guy, he's never run anything. And this is a huge enterprise, the Department of Defense. Matt Gaetz has no experience that would lend itself towards running the Department of Justice and everything that's involved there. And people think the Department of Justice is just about, you know, who's getting prosecuted, that we're talking about on national news. We're talking about a huge swath of criminals in this country and running a department with integrity, going after bad guys that are breaking the law, whether it's drugs or bank robberies or other serious crimes, criminal enterprises that are complex and difficult. I mean, Andrew can tell you all this. It is shocking. I mean, I guess I shouldn't be shocked, but it sure is nervy for somebody who has his own ethical problems to be nominated for a job that has had really some stellar men and women running that department in my lifetime and, frankly, in the history of this country.
I want to make sure that we don't sort of follow the shiny object of the Matt Gaetz of it all. And I would like to ask you, Andrew, to take the Fox Weekend host, Mr. Hegseth, Tulsi Gabbard, and Matt Gaetz as a piece, and just articulate for me what the Director of National Intelligence, the Department of Defense, and the U.S. Department of Justice do on, say, a September 11th-like tragedy for the nation. What are the roles of those three agencies?
It's funny. That's exactly where I was going, because post 9/11, what you do in the intelligence community, at the Department of Defense, at the CIA, at the Department of Justice, at the FBI, is you do all of the things within the FBI and the department that Claire talked about, sort of domestic criminal law enforcement. And obviously those can be incredibly important. They can involve murder and rape and child pornography and the kinds of crimes that everyone listening would find horrendous and have to be prevented and prosecuted. But post 9/11, this is a very dangerous and serious world. It is absolutely imperative that those agencies are operated by experienced adults, people who know what they're doing, who can make this country safe. Part of that is knowing the intelligence community, understanding triage, what are real threats, what are not so real threats, and also being able to build really important relationships with countries around the world, those who are sort of publicly friendly to us and those who are willing to be friendly and provide information, but in a quiet way. So having those diplomatic skills is incredibly important in order to make this country safe. Just to be clear, it's about safety of Americans and other people living in this country. Having people who are not qualified or not serious is something that endangers this country. I have to say, like, for the first reaction to these nominations is that they must be sort of like test balloons, because it's so unimaginable that that is what you would do for a topic that is so serious. And I really, truly hope that Claire is right, that we're going to see that sort of adult supervision come from the Senate in an area that is so important to all of our safety.
Well, and I guess, you know, the only thing that I would say before everyone loses their collective minds here over the lack of seriousness is that Donald Trump wasn't elected to put Tulsi Gabbard in charge of national security or Matt Gaetz in charge of the Department of Justice or the Fox Weekend guy whose name what is his name? Pete Hegseth. Can I get a spelling? Hegseth. So Donald Trump was elected to do one thing: keep Americans safe. That's what his voters would tell you. And that means economically secure and safe from, let me quote Trump, criminal gangs. Who deals with criminal gangs, Claire? Might it be anyone at DOJ? I mean, who deals with Iran, a country that Donald Trump says is running all over the USA? Might it be DOD or the intelligence community? Donald Trump can't leave unserious people in charge of the things that are the very reason his base of supporters turned out and voted for him.